Respect all the people who joined us on time. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Scott Wright, the Deputy Division Director.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Donna. I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about some of the things that have been going on here at DFA. Relevant to this particular conversation, the Community Development Block Grant Program has transitioned over to the new Infrastructure Division. And the Infrastructure Division was recently created last July. It started, and we've been building it up rapidly. And so part of that build is acquiring the CDBG program team. Donna and Christina, Charles, Jalen, Stephanie. And we're during this transition, essentially what we did was we left the capital outlay in the local government division so that this team could focus exclusively on the CDBG program. And what we found is they've been incredibly successful since this transition. We had upwards of 70 open projects at one time when they transitioned to this division, and now we're down to below 50. So huge kudos to Donna and the team. That's an incredible amount of work. I did see some names that I recognize for the participants, so hello to those old colleagues and hello to those new colleagues. But I was formerly the CDBG bureau chief when I was at local government, and it was unusual for us to have anything above 25 or 30 projects. So when I saw that the team had a pretty significant portfolio of CDBG projects, that's one of the things that the team wanted to work on. So in conjunction with that, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but we're kind of taking a new perspective of the CDBG program, and we're opening it up so that these projects are a little bit easier on you all. The cap of $750,000 in 2025 construction terms is just simply not enough. And we're hoping that removing that cap and allowing folks to focus on, larger projects, more meaningful projects for the LMI and for your all community. We're hopeful that increases the preparedness and the preparation and the planning necessary for these projects to be successful. So we are excited. You all are essentially going to be the first round of, I don't want to call it guinea pigs, but we're going to go through this process together. And we wholeheartedly believe that this is going to be an improvement for you all. It's going to be an improvement for us. It's going to allow staff to be more proactive and more resourceful for you all. And so we're really excited. We really anticipate that this is going to be a positive thing in the CDBG world. And I think Donna and team will explain some of those reasons throughout the presentations today. But I just wanted to welcome everybody, say thank you for your interest, thank you for your participation, and we will be here to answer any questions that you may have. So again, thank you, and I look forward to the presentation, and I will turn it over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning, everybody. So happy to see so many familiar names, and I wish we could see faces, but we have to block the videos and mute because of the large number of attendees. So welcome. We're excited to have you here for this 3-hour workshop, and I am going to begin by sharing my screen. See here. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll start with some updates and deadlines. So the goal of today's workshop is just to provide an overview on what you're going to need for a CDBG 2025 application. Complete instructions are in the application materials and you will need those. I don't know how many of you remember the old days when this workshop used to be an entire day. So and even then it wasn't comprehensive. And so now that we've condensed it to a half day, just please know that we're doing an overview today. So we already had the opening by Scott. Thank you very much. And now we are going to do the updates and deadlines. And I'm Donna Stewart. I'll do that. And then next we'll have a presentation on eligibility and public participation by Stephanie Kramer. And then I will do a presentation on LMI methodology and calculation. And then after that, we will have a presentation on application resources by Christina Caltagironi. And then I will do the final presentation entitled Best Practices. So between the presentations, we will be having quizzes and we will also take questions. So that is the agenda for today. And I wanted to introduce all of our team. And of course, Scott named everybody's first name, but here are their complete names. We are fully staffed right now. Since the move to IPDD, as Scott mentioned, we no longer do capital outlay. So this is our full team. And so you met Scott, you've met me, Stephanie Kramer is with us, Christina Caltagironi, Charles Doby, and Jalen Narvaez. And I want to say between this team, we have a lot of experience with the state, a lot of experience with local entities, and a lot of project management and just general problem solving skills. So I think we're well set up to be able to assist you. Some housekeeping for today with this lovely picture of pipes that were removed from a CDBG project in the village of Melrose. So after the workshop, there will be a test. And sorry about this, folks, but we decided that it's a learning tool. So there will be a test. We will send you an email with a link for the test. So I would say to listen carefully. You will note that all of the participants have been muted and have their cameras blocked, but if you wish to be unmuted, you can raise your hand and we will be looking out for that. Charles will be monitoring the chat and you're welcome to use the chat at any time. We will make sure that no comment or question is neglected. If we don't take the questions during the presentation, we will definitely get them at the end of the presentations. And on that, I would just like to ask if we could keep questions to the materials being presented. If it's a more involved issue, we may have to refer you to your project manager to set up a meeting. As many of you know with CDBG, sometimes there are not quick and easy answers. It's something where we need to ask you more questions to be able to answer your question. So we look forward to doing that, if not today, then in future conversations. So updates, this is the fun stuff. As Scott said, we moved to a new division. With that, we are no longer doing capital outlay. We are fully devoted to CDBG. Another exciting update and something that we've been waiting for a number of years is that we are finally moving forward with the NMAC rule amendment process. Now, there will be a public hearing May 28th. If you're interested in that, you can find all that information on our website. We're very excited to have that first step taking place. Another update is that the Community Development Council last year approved us to use our entire 2024 allocation for supplemental funding. And some of you have benefited from this. Some of the councils of governments on the call are well aware of this funding. There is still some of that funding remaining, but the bulk of it has already been utilized on open projects. And as Scott mentioned, we really had a backlog of open projects in 2024, and it was really our goal to expedite the closing of projects. And I think a lot of you know what happened or have heard what happened, but basically with the rising prices and the supply chain issues and all the other difficulties that face infrastructure and have faced infrastructure in the last few years, we had a number of projects that would get stalled. They were either searching for additional leveraging or dealing with failed bid after failed bid. And so we had projects that were 5 or 6 years long, and we still have some that are that long that have not been closed. So focusing as much of our attention as we could on getting those projects closed out, I'm happy to report that we have gone from about 70 open projects this time last year to 48. So I think that's an amazing accomplishment for our team, and we still need to continue to work to get that number down. So with all of those considerations, we did request in November of last year, the CDC approved us to make some changes for 2025 that because we didn't think that we would have the NMAC revised in time for this 2025 cycle. So the Community Development Council approved these changes. And so you've already heard about this year being so special in that there is no cap on the grant amount that you can request. Now, of course, I wish that we could say the sky is the limit, but we are limited to whatever allocation we receive. So I don't anticipate that we would have more than $11 million available. So if anybody's speculating and trying to swoop in and steal the pot, just keep that in mind. But I think this is going to open a lot of doors, and the hope is that the projects will now be able to request the money, the amount of money that they actually feel they need. Another exciting development is that, and this was also the Community Development Council's interest, they wanted to make sure the program was equally accessible to rural entities. And so we have dropped the match requirement this year for rural entities. Any rural applicant can apply without contributing a match. For the non-rural applicants, the 10% match requirement still applies. And then, of course, everybody's welcome to provide leveraging above and beyond for extra points if they so desire. Another important development this year is we are now requiring every project to have a professional external project administrator. And we'll talk more about that in the presentations to come. Talk about how to procure it, how to put the right documents in your application so that the application is eligible. For the most part, we tried not to change the old things in the application that still work. We did make some changes, but mostly regarding the things on this page. You will notice, however, that it is shorter, and I'm sure that everybody would be happy to see that. Another improvement that we have, or maybe not, maybe it's just a change, but in conjunction with the team no longer doing capital outlay, we have redrawn the regions for the project managers. And so you may notice when you look at the lists that you don't have the same project manager now as you had for your last CDBG project. So I would say just pay attention to that. The list is 2 more slides from now, but you'll see the list in a second. Just be aware that your project manager may have changed. So deadlines. These are the deadlines we'll be talking about for the most during today's presentation. The threshold compliance deadline has already passed, and that was April 18th. Those of you who have been doing CDBG for years and years may remember that that date was usually in February. So even putting it in April is fairly generous. I think you will hear more about what is involved in the threshold when we get to Stephanie's presentation, which will be next. Then, of course, today is the May 6th workshop date. And then the next two deadlines are LMI deadlines, and June 6th is the LMI methodology approval deadline. And then July 15th is the LMI calculation and documentation deadline. And then the biggest deadline on this page would be the August 19th deadline for your application. And that's when your application needs to be submitted. And then we have scheduled dates for the CDC application hearing and the CDC allocation meeting of September 30th and October 21st. But those, of course, are tentative until we confirm with the CDC, and we'll do that when we get closer to that time. And you can find our entire draft schedule on the website, and it's draft because it's always subject to change. We hope it doesn't change, but it might. So who is your project manager is going to be a key question to figure out sooner rather than later. So we do have this in list form called county assignments, and it's on the website. And I believe we're going to be providing those links in the chat. Charles is confirming. Excellent. And then we also have this beautiful map that Jalen did for us so that you can look up according to color and see what color your county is and figure out who your project manager is. And we'll bring this map up again several times during the workshop just to continue to reference it. And because it's so beautiful. So after this workshop, you'll be getting an email from us, which will have two links. One will be to a survey. We'd really like your honest feedback about the workshop and our program. And then the other one is going to be the test. And on that, we need an 80% score or above for 2 people for each application. The 2 people would be one from the applicant's entity, and then one from the applicant's chosen and procured and contracted professional administrator. So don't worry too much. There is an opportunity to retake the test if you don't pass the first time, but just hopefully our hope is that you will listen attentively. Connect with us after this workshop. The first thing to do would be to reach out to your project manager and connect with them. And then, of course, get into making your plan and arranging the order of activities that you need to do in order to accomplish your application. So this is just some links to materials, and they're going to be also in the PDF that's in the chat. We tried to put the links out here in a lot of different manners and methods in the attempt to make it easier for you. So hopefully we're doing well with that. And then I believe that's the last slide on this presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Jalen for the first quiz.
Okay, Donna, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Jalen. I'm new to the CDBG team. I look forward to working with many of you. As Donna mentioned, there will be a required test for you to pass. I have attached little Quizlets to certain presentations to kind of help you with that. They're little cheat sheets. So if you want to participate, you can enter via QR code. And Charles will also be dropping the link in the chat for you to participate. And we'll just go over some of the test questions that are going to possibly be on that required application exam. So I'm just going to give you a few moments to log in via QR code or the link and then submit your answers. And then we'll go over the answers really quickly. Okay, so let's just see if we have some answers submitted. Oop, things are refreshing. Let me go ahead and log in. I think we're having a glitch. Perfect. So just to go over some of the questions, yes, the application deadline is August 19th. Looks like majority of you got that correct. Is it possible for an applicant to request $3 million in funding for 2025? Yes, the CDC has waived the cap on the grant amounts for 2025. And it looks like we had a variety of answers here, but the correct one would be a professional administrator secured through RFP using a 3A unless the administrator is a COG. Awesome. So thank you for participating, and there will be more of these throughout the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Donna so that she can go ahead and take any of your questions.
Thank you, Jalen. That was fun, I have to say. I thought so anyway. Charles, what do we have in the chat?
Thanks, Donna. We've got one question from Joni Gay. What if we missed the threshold compliance deadline? Did we miss our opportunity to apply at the August deadline?
So good question. There is the opportunity to request a waiver, and DFA will be reviewing those on a case-by-case basis. So I would say if you're already here today, stay with us. And then the next step would be to reach out to the project manager, who is going to be yours according to the map, and talk with them. And then if you're going to be preparing a letter to request the threshold, would be what you would need to do.
That's all we have in questions.
Alrighty, well then that means it is time for our next presentation, and that is going to be from Stephanie Kramer. And so I want to turn the floor over for the presentation on eligibility and public participation.
Can you see the screen? All right, good morning.
Yes.
I hope everyone's doing good. I'm going to do a presentation on CDBG eligibility requirements and public participation. So I'll start with CDBG eligibility requirements. All right. So all entities must adhere to federal rule and regulations. You can find this on the page 6 of the application. So we specifically asked them to look at federal regulation CFR 24, and you will look at specifically the environmental review, the procurement, and the community development block grants. And then we also ask, and it also is a requirement that you actually adhere to this rules and regulations contained in the New Mexico Administrative Code, which is our NMAC. And who is eligible? Eligible grantees who can apply for the application will be local governments, counties, and municipalities. We also ask them to require that they actually do follow our site control, which they will need to demonstrate ownership, and that they, so we will ask the chief elected official to use the CDBG site certificate form, which is the Exhibit 1F. Any not eligible grantee will be tribes, pueblos, and entitlement cities. These actually get direct funding from HUD or their U.S. Department Treasury. All right. So for eligible categories and activities for the application cycle. For infrastructure, you can do water and sewer systems, roads, streets, and highways, or parking and waste disposal facilities. And then for public facilities, you can do public acquisition, construction, rehab, and repair, or non-resident facilities for health, social, and recreational use. And then we also have a requirement for colonias, which means that they must be in existence prior to November 1990, and they must be located within 150 miles of the U.S. border. And if you have a question whether or not you are a colonias, you can reach out to your your project manager, and they will be able to help you figure that out, or your COG. All right. And then we as a state must allocate 10% of our CDBG funding each year to a colonias grant agreement. All right. And then for Aclonius, we must address the lack of potable water supply as well as inadequate sewage system. All right, and these, for ineligible activities, we cannot do government buildings or anything government-wise, except if they are ADA accessible. If you're doing anything with ADA, you can apply if it is a government building. We also don't allow housing subsidies, political expense, and general operating expense are not ineligible activities for your grant agreement. All right, and now we'll move forward to public participation. Which is a key thing for your application cycle. All right, what is the benefit? The benefit of doing a public participation is it helps with getting feedback. So it helps in guiding, informing, and getting opportunities to hear from your community on what they would want for your grant agreement or your application. They will help identify areas of needing more planning and research, and it allows them to gain trust. It allows you to gain trust, and it allows them to open up more on what they are wanting from their community itself. It also helps you in if there's going to be any interruptions during the project. So it allows you to let them know if there's going to be any interruptions to their daily cycle of life. All right. And then how do you plan a public hearing? You want to make sure you know your agenda. So you want to know what you're going to do, what you're going to talk about. It also must be a standalone meeting. It cannot be along with any other community meeting that you have. You can hold a community meeting, but you must adjourn that meeting and start the CDBG hearing. And also lay some ground rules. Make sure that you can go through your presentation or just anything else before anything, so having those ground rules helps. Ensure you have time to practice and know your timeline. So make sure you know your timeline and how long it's going to take to do the application. So knowing that will help. The location. You want to make sure you have a good location for your community hearing. You want to make sure you have enough space to hold everyone. It has a good parking. It has ADA accessibility if it is needed. And you want to have a familiarity to the location, as well as the visible sign-in sheets. As well as always offer a virtual option to those who cannot make it. And you can utilize the chat for the sign-in options. All right. And so for public hearings, you have to have a minimum of 2 to meet the requirements for the application. It is required. You can hold more than 2, which will give you more points if you do hold more 2. So you will normally start with your pre-project selection hearing, which normally is where you gather project ideas. You don't always have a project labeled at your pre-project selection hearing. And then you normally do a post-project selection hearing, and that's when you normally know your project, and that's when you start getting feedback. All right, and so for your application requirements, we ask that you have a posting of the notice, which is your Exhibit 1Q, and that will actually follow with an affidavit of publication or evidence of posting. All right, and then with that, you will also have your meeting agenda and your meeting minutes, which are your Exhibit 1Q1 or your 1Q2. And on the table on the side, you will have to make sure for, like I said, for your dates and times, you have 22 days. So it normally takes 22 days for your post and for your 2 public hearings. And if you do more, that's going to add more because you have to make sure you have you post it, and you are required to have 10 days, and then you can conduct your meeting. And then here is an example of your 1Q, which will be attached to your application. And then you also require other public participation requirements during your open project. So if you're going to amend anything, so if you're going to ask or a substantial change such as budget or scope, you will need to hold another public meeting. Citizen participation plan, which is your Exhibit 1Z, and this is an annual requirement, and your environmental and closeout. All right, and just like Donna had said, I would go over the threshold requirements. The main threshold requirement is you are only allowed 1 CDBG open infrastructure project, and that must be completed by April 18th of 2025. If you have not, or if you do have an open project and you know what's in the closeout, you can ask for a waiver, and we'll look at those by case scenarios, so just get with your project manager. If you have any previous monitoring findings or concerns, those must be resolved. And if you have for the DFA LGD, you must certify your applicant's current fiscal operating budget, and you must be current with all your financial reports quarterly and monthly with your DFA LGD budget. You also must have your most recent audit into the New Mexico State Auditors, and your we'll look at the Uniform Grant Guidance tool to be factored in as well. And that will be all that I have, and we'll go to Jalen for your quiz.
Okay. Alrighty, so we'll do the second quiz, and please let me know if I'm giving you guys enough time to scan the QR code or look up the link. I just don't want to read the questions to you because I know how that could be while you're answering questions. But there's the QR code for the CDBG requirements, eligibility and requirements, and I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and take the little Quizlet. Alrighty, so let's see if the computer will pull up your... Awesome. Perfect. So the correct answer is complete the current project by the threshold date or receive a waiver from DFA if you have a current CDBG project open. Awesome. Here we have it. Go ahead and put the bar so you can see the other answers. So definitely contact your project manager, specifically your assigned county project manager, if you have any questions for the process or training questions, anything at all. We're here to help you. And then, yes, 2 are the minimum required public hearings per application, but again, you can do more than 2. 2 is just the minimum. So thank you for participating again, and I'm going to go ahead and give you back to Stephanie for questions before we take a short break.
Charles. Thank you, Jalen. Charles, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have one question from your presentation and then one from the previous presentation. I'll go over yours first. Is a virtual option for public hearings mandatory?
No, it's not. We just ask you to offer it just in case. It's just a nice option.
And then the question from the previous for Donna. Is the certification required only if you are requesting CDBG funding or a requirement no matter what?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maricela, if you could either clarify in the chat or we could unmute you if you'd like to clarify your question. Not sure which certification you're talking about. Let's give her a minute. Charles, can you unmute Maricela? We're going to try to.
Can you, Stephanie?
Where is she at? Can she raise her hand? Okay.
You got her?
Yeah.
We're working on it, Maricela.
Okay. She should be allowed to unmute herself now. Can you unmute yourself, Marcella?
Yes, thank you. So on the last presentation, on one of the slides, it said that you must take a test and you must pass it with an 80, and that's for 2 individuals. Is that test in order to request CBDG funding, or is it just a requirement, no matter if you're requesting that or not per entity?
Yes, ma'am. So now I understand your question, and the test is for CDBG applications. So if you're not applying for CDBG funding, then you do not need to pass the test. So it's just going to be a requirement on the applications that we need to see those completed past tests from the grant or from the applicant entity and from the administrator. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for attending. Okay, so do we have any more questions, Charles?
That's all we have.
Alrighty, well, in that case, we can go ahead and break for
5 minutes?
5 minutes, yes.
Yeah, let's do 5 minutes and we will be right back with you. So I think it's been about 5 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and pick up where we left off. So before we get into the presentation, Charles, is there anything else in the chat going on?
Yeah, we've got one question from Deborah. Where do you take a test?
Okay, so the test is going to be a link that we send you after the workshop. So you'll get an email and it'll have a link to the test. So I wouldn't worry about that for now, except for just to be listening. The test is different from the quizzes. The quizzes are optional, but we do appreciate everybody who's participating. And we do want to point out that the test is made up of quiz questions, so it's going to help you when you do go to take a test.
And then Donna, we've got one hand up from Jeanette. I'm going to go ahead and allow your mic, Jeanette, and then you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Sometimes you have to do it twice.
I lost you, Jeanette. Can you put your hand back up? If you still have a question, Jeanette, can you throw your hand back up and I'll unmute you?
And we'll wait a second for Jeanette. And while we're doing that, I just want to say we're not only in a new division, we're dealing with new technology here. We have a brand new owl, and so we are we're piloting this new technology today.
All right, Jeanette, your mic is allowed, so go ahead and unmute yourself.
And if that's not working out for you, Jeanette, you can also put your question in the chat and we will get to it at our next opportunity.
Okay, in the meantime, we've got another question that came in from Todd. How soon must we complete the test?
We have not put any deadlines on that. I think as long as you complete it by the application deadline, you're going to be fine. And the reason why I think we need to give that much latitude is because it's possible that you're going to go out to procure for your administrator, and maybe your administrator didn't attend this workshop, and then you want to ask them to go watch the recording and then complete the test. So that we'd like to leave the door open for that. I hope that answers your question.
And then we've got a question from Danny. When hiring a project manager, does the entity have to pay or can it be added to the grant application?
So if there's any cost before the application, the grantee entity would have to assume that, or the applicant entity would have to assume that. The cost of administrating the project can be paid from the time of the grant agreement being executed only. And that would be, there's a 3% cap on CDBG funds that can be used for administration, which we will get into in much more detail in a later presentation.
And that's all we've got, Donna.
All right, thank you, Charles. Okay, so unless anybody else has anything, we are going to just jump into the LMI methodology and calculation. And you can see here, there is a little bird counting beneficiaries. So some things we're going to look at in this presentation, and just to understand why this is necessary, because LMI is one of the most challenging things that we deal with on CDBG. It's necessary because it allows us to meet our national objective, and that is to assist low to moderate income persons. So it's very important. It is one of the most fundamental requirements that we have on the program. So for our program, CDBG applicants have to establish that they have a population that will be served or receive benefit from the project that is at least 51% LMI. So that's what this whole presentation is about, is proving that out. What steps do we need you to go through to prove that out? When we say LMI, the numbers that we're talking about are taken from the Section 8 guidelines, and you can find those in Exhibit B. That's on our website. It's in all of the links, and it's basically 80% of those Section 8 guidelines is the LMI number that we're going for. And you'll see it's also listed as low on that sheet. So there are also ways to qualify using groups that HUD presumes to be LMI, such as seniors, the severely disabled, homeless, illiterate, and there is a complete list of those groups on page 20 of your application instructions. That would be a LMI that we would call limited clientele, and we will get into this in much more detail. So in doing all of the LMI activities for your application, please refer to pages 10 through 22 of the application instructions. And you can see just by the fact that it's taking up so many pages in the application that it's a pretty detailed thing. So tighten your seatbelts, and here we go. So there are 3 basic ways to qualify. These have been around forever and ever. So those of you who've been doing CDBG for a number of years, and we so appreciate you. And among those, we know the councils of governments are the first people who come to mind. This hasn't changed. So it's the ACS, and that's the sheet with the yellow highlights for the entities, which we'll show on the next slide. And that's the easier way to qualify, comparatively speaking, of course. Then there's the limited clientele option, and that is if you can prove that your project is benefiting one of these groups that are considered to be, that HUD presumes to be LMI. And then there's a third option of actually going out and doing your own survey. And you could do this either for a targeted area if your project is not benefiting the entire entity, say it's just benefiting a little neighborhood or a couple of streets, and then you would have to do a survey to qualify. You could also, if you look at the ACS sheet and say, why are we 50%? I know this community is LMI, and say you just want to go and do a survey for the whole city. You could also do that. There is a little asterisk here on the slide, alternative means of documenting a targeted area. So this is new. We're not sure it'll work. We are providing it as a possibility for you all to experiment with, but I would say use this as a last resort. And we do have one slide devoted to this, and we do have a few pages of instructions that you can request from your project manager, or I think Charles will be also putting that in the chat. But for now, let's focus on numbers 1, 2, and 3, because those are the viable options that we know are going to work for a lot of applicants. So here is our ACS chart, and I know that it's cutting off some of the entities at the bottom there, but don't worry, you can look at this, you can go to the links and look at this on the website if you haven't already. But basically the entities highlighted in yellow would have the possibility of qualifying with the ACS. And you'll see on the next slide why I say they'll have the possibility. It's not a sure thing even with that, because they still have to prove out that it's impacting your project is going to impact the entire entity. Now, you'll see 3 columns after each entity. So if we look at the city of Anthony, you'll see, and I'm sorry if you can barely see this, but it's up there. And it says that for LMI 24, it says 67%, and then LMI 22, the column next to that, says 65%, and then LMI 20, it says 67%. So it's the column on the left, the column that says 24, that the applicants will be using for this year. We have provided the old information in case you're one of those entities that's close to 51% and you're kind of on the fence. Should we do a survey? Should we not do a survey? Just for the historical information so that you can see how your entity was surveyed in the previous years. So that's a little bit more about that. And this sheet has not changed. It looks basically the way it has looked for the last several years, just with different data. So with that, say that you're Anthony, sorry to pick on Anthony, but we got to have an example for these things sometimes. So you have 67% and you're saying, I want to do a project and I want to use the ACS to qualify. How can I do that? So they would have to send a letter to their project manager by June 6th And in this letter, they would have to address all of these issues here. They would first have to give us a little bit of the scope of their project, and maybe even more than a little bit, because we're going to need that to ensure, to verify that it would definitely be providing a benefit to the entire city. So, and you'll have that with some projects and you won't have it with others, and it just depends on the nature of the project. So we would need that information to confirm that. We would also need to see the percent, you say it'd be 67% because that's what it says on the ACS sheet, and then the population of the city. And then we'd also need a map in most cases to be able to see where the location of the project is. There may be some cases where a map is not needed, but it's just going to depend on the type of project that you are trying to apply for. And I would strongly recommend discussing these things with your project manager. Sometimes we have to ask for this letter to be revised to get all the data that we need here. But this is the gist of it, is providing the scope, the population, you name the percentage, you provide the justification of how the whole entity is receiving this benefit. That's the key here. So before we go to limited clientele, Charles, are there any questions in the chat so far?
Yeah, we have a couple, Donna.
Okay.
What is the max request amount?
There is no cap this year.
Perfect. Bianca asks, what's the smallest geography we can use ACS data for? Can we use census tracts?
So no, not for the ACS. The ACS is entity-wide. So if your entity is not listed on this this sheet that I showed, which I'm going to show again, if your entity is not listed here, you can't use the ACS. Now, there is an option to use census tracts, and that's our alternative option that we don't know if it's going to work or not. So we'll save that for the end, and we will cover it at that time.
And then Felicity asks, can you scroll down so we can see the bottom of the LMI eligibility sheet? Thank you. And Felicity, this link is also in the chat for the LMI eligibility sheet.
Yes, thank you, Felicity. Unfortunately, I cannot scroll because it's on the slide that way. So you will have to look that up on the link. Sorry about that.
And we just got a new one. Donna, can an entity submit a letter for an entity-wide project and a targeted area project? That way, if the community is not eligible based on the survey, they can proceed with the entity-wide project.
Absolutely. So, and thank you so much, kind person. Who was that, Charles?
That's Tiffany Goolsby.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany. You paid attention to the slide and you caught a bullet that I forgot to articulate. So I really appreciate that. So two things. Yes, if an entity wants to, if they're still not decided on a project, they still haven't selected it, they can provide however many LMI methodology letters they want. We have had 3 before from an entity, so that's possible. If they're wanting to do one letter to do for the ACS for an entity-wide benefit, say they have it's a small city and they're trying to do a water system and it's going to provide impact to the whole entity, but they're also thinking about doing this street project in a little neighborhood and they know they'd have to do a survey for that, they can definitely do both at the same time. But the survey is going to be a different process, which we'll cover in a few slides. But very good question, and I hope that that's clear that you may submit more than one methodology request.
Those are all the questions we have right now, Donna.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So I'm glad we did that because I know with this stuff, sometimes it's not easy to sit with like not having an answer to your questions. So we'll try to keep up with you guys with your questions. So limited clientele. So this is an option that may work for some projects, and it's worked well for senior centers And we've had some ADA projects with this methodology. And basically, this is where we're identifying a group that's presumed to be LMI, and we are establishing either that this center is designated for only this group, for example, a senior center. So that would be the first point there. Another option is if you have a center that has mixed clientele, but you have the demographic information on that clientele to show us, to establish that 51% of the people who go to the center are LMI. You could do it that way. And then lastly, there might be an activity or a center where access is restricted to persons that are LMI. So those would be the options for the limited clientele, and there is more information in the application instructions, and you can also talk with your project manager if you think you'd like to pursue a project that may qualify under the LMC. And just another thought on the LMC, that it may be possible to take care of your LMI with just that initial letter due June 6th. If you have a situation, if say it's a senior center and 100% of the beneficiaries are seniors, you would not need to do anything in follow-up. But if you need to do a survey, or if you're looking at number 2 of like looking at the demographic information to prove that 51% of them are LMI, and you need to provide us additional data, then you might be also needing to give us documentation to the July 15th LMI calculation deadline. So this one may need to present things for 2 deadlines. And I might have missed this on the previous slide on the ACS, so I'm going to go back, and I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't confuse anybody that's new to this. But if you're doing ACS, you're only needing to give us 1 letter by the June 6th deadline. And then you'd be getting a letter of approval back from us. And we'll remind you about this about 5 more times before this presentation concludes. But we do need you to send all of those LMI materials with your application. The letters that you've sent, the letters that we've sent, all of that has to be part of your application. So we've done ACS, we've done LMC, and so now let's look at the survey. So the survey, this is when you have what we've called a target area of benefit. Or again, you could say, I want to survey my whole entity because I don't believe the ACS percentage, I don't think it's 50, I think it's 52. So we're going to do a survey of the whole entity. You could do that too. But let's assume we're doing a targeted project. It's a little neighborhood, and we're doing a street project there, and we can't prove out that it's going to benefit the entire entity, so we have to survey the neighborhood. So there's going to be an exchange of 4 letters, 1 coming from the applicant to DFA in conjunction with the June 6th methodology deadline. And it's going to have a lot of information, which we'll look at on the next slide. And then DFA is going to have to approve that in letter number 2 before you do your survey. And that's super important because I don't want you to have to do your survey over. So you get that approval from your project manager, then you go do the survey, and then you send us letter 3, where you're actually giving us all the information you found in your survey. You're giving us all the questionnaires, a summary table of all the data. We'll get into everything that goes with that letter, but it's a very important letter, and that's what is going to establish your percentage of LMI for the project. And then hopefully you'll be getting back letter 4 from your DFA project manager approving those survey results. And then all of these letters are going into the application. So, and once again, just those deadlines just for clarity. And so this is why we have the 2 LMI deadlines. It's all about the survey, folks. That's why we have these 2 deadlines. That first one, you're proving out what your methodology is, and the second one, you're saying, we did the survey, please approve. So what goes into letter number 1 if you're doing a survey? we needed to contain something about the project description. We also need the exact number of households in the universe. And what do we mean when we say the universe? We mean that the whole area, the range of which is receiving benefit from your project. So you're gonna probably have to sit down with a map to establish that and count out how many households are on that map, on those streets. And you're gonna have to look carefully, because like if it's a street project, have you captured all the streets that are going to provide benefit from that? And so that's something where we also look at, and sometimes we'll push back and say, we think that street behind there is also because look, they can come out this way, and so the maps are very important to this process. But anyway, you'll use the map to establish the number of households, and that's going to help you figure out what your sample size is. And so the sample size is generally a smaller number than the actual number of households. And that there's a table with that in the application instructions where you can look up and see, okay, if I have 500 people to survey, 500 households, my sample size is going to be whatever it is. You also will need to select and establish a method for doing your survey. Are you going to go door to door? Are you going to try and make phone calls? And by the way, we almost never have people doing phone calls, because how are you sure that you have everybody's phone number? So if you do have a situation like that where you have everybody's phone number, maybe you could do that. Another possibility is maybe something online, but that has its issues as well, because you have to figure out how to make sure that it's random, because that's another thing that we're going to require from you. But anyway, you're going to tell us what method you want to use, and you're also going to tell us if you have to do something as a backup, what additional method you would use. Attachments, you're going to have to attach the map of the universe, your sample questionnaire populated with those Section 8 numbers that we talked about from Exhibit B. And it doesn't say Exhibit B here on the slide, but it is Exhibit B in your materials. And then you're going to do what we call the randomizer, which is you're going to number all the households on your map and then put those numbers into the randomizer, and it's going to give them back to you in a random order. And that's going to be the order that you would reach out to take those surveys, to ensure that you're not going first to the folks, the folks in your neighborhood. So we want to make sure that you're not cherry picking the houses that you want to interview in, so that it's truly objective. So you'll see on the next slide, I have a map. Or no, it's actually 2 slides from now. I have a map, and you'll see one way to number those households. So I just want to also point out, in addition to the application instructions, we also have the CDBG guidebook for conducting local income surveys. This is a HUD tool, and the links were down a couple of weeks ago when we were working on this, but I believe that link is again enabled, and it is in this presentation. So I want to move on to the next slide, which is actually a sample letter that has done this, and it's a real one that I did actually remove the name of the entity, but it's very nicely done. And so what this entity is doing actually is they're preparing to do 2 surveys, because they say in the letter they're not sure if one of them will qualify, and so they've identified these 2 areas. And I think that was a really smart thing to do, a smart way to approach it. And you'll see they've got the type of survey, they've said that they've attached the questionnaire, they figured out what their sample size is, they put it through the randomizer, and they've attached that. Non-reachable households are valued at 2.5. Now you can replace the non-reachable households if you have enough households to do that. So this is a good example And I just wanted to share that because I know sometimes it really helps for learning purposes to be able to see examples. So we're going to go to a map for a different project, and with this one I didn't hide the name of the entity, and I worked with Quay County on this survey, and I have fond memories of that. So, but you can see that there's a legend here that has all the numbered households and then all the addresses. And that's crucial to this process of being able to have DFA review your materials and ensure that every household has been counted. And then sometimes we go back and look at the map with you and we say, what about this building over here? Why is that not numbered? Oh, well, it's a barn or whatever. And we may have those kind of questions for you. So again, just another example to just give you some ideas. So then the next step is going to be letter 3, and I guess I skipped a letter. So there was a letter in there from your DFA project manager. That was letter number 2, telling you, we approve your methodology, please go forward and do your survey. Do not go forward and do your survey until you get that letter. And if you're having problems not getting that letter at any time in this process, if you feel that there's a letter that you should have gotten from your project manager that you did not get, please write them again. And if you still don't get an answer, it may be somebody took leave, and so you're welcome to reach out to me if your project manager did not answer you. So letter 3 is going to be from the applicant to DFA after you did your survey, giving us your results and totaling up the number of beneficiaries that you found, the number of those that are LMI beneficiaries, and the percentage of LMI that you have. And it's going to report out also on the actual number of households. Did that change or not? Occasionally, something that looks like it's a building on a map that that you might have gotten for this process, it might not be clear. Is that a vacant building? Is that a barn? What is that? So just checking all those boxes and closing all those loops, and then please provide all the attachments, an Excel spreadsheet showing all the answers on your questionnaires, because the project manager has to verify all the questionnaires. All the questionnaires, Exhibit D, which is basically all the survey takers certifying that I'm doing this survey, I know the rules, and I'm going to do this right. Exhibit E, which basically just helps you calculate the percentage, and then the map again. So all of that needs to go with letter number 3, and it needs to be sent to us by the July 15th deadline. And if you have it early, I would encourage you to send it early, because sometimes it takes some back and forth with your project manager of going over it. And sometimes there's an issue or something, what if the project manager asks you to go take another couple of surveys? I mean, so just to save yourself some time, try and get that in, but we are on a tight timeline this year and we appreciate that. So if we get it, as long as we get it by July 15th, we will work with you to try and get it approved so you can make the application deadline. So this is a letter that from DFA to an applicant that you should be receiving after you send us your survey. And again, I'm just showing this because it's super important that we have all those in the applications. And if you did not get a letter that looks something like this after you sent in your survey, please remind your project manager, and if that doesn't work, then ask me. And before we go forward, Charles, is there anything going on in the chat?
Yeah, we've got 3 questions right now, Donna. We got a follow-up from Tiffany on her question. Can the governing body select 2 potential projects? Or is a community only able to submit letters on more than 1 potential project if the governing body has not selected a project yet?
So I don't know if your governing body can select two projects because that would be up to the governing body. I don't think we have any issue with that. And if you're trying to prepare two different trajectories, thinking we don't know if the survey is going to come up with a qualifying LMI, so we want to be covering both of these bases, I would say we can accommodate that. I don't see any issue with that. We might then need for you to follow up with the governing body and confirm that you selected the project that you selected, but we can check on that for you. It's a creative approach that, and we haven't had that question before. But in theory, that would, it's more up to your governing body than to us. If you want to do that to try and keep your options open, I would say we would work with you on that.
And then we've got a question from Dora. If an area has an emergency declaration and is under 51% for the 24 data, can that qualify them? There is a state national objective that states a project must address existing conditions that pose a serious and immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community, flooding, fires, etc.
Hi Dora, good morning. I know you've asked me about this before, and I do not see that. I would love to say yes, but I do not see that in our requirements, in our manual, or in the NMAC. I don't see that we have the latitude to substitute the emergency declaration for the qualifying LMI. But if you could find that in our NMAC or the application, or even if any of our materials, and bring it to our attention, we'd be happy to take another look at it.
And then lastly, we have a question from Deborah. We have lots of surrounding small villages. Would that be included in the map?
So the entity, so this is going to be one of those tough ones that we can't probably answer. We're going to have to ask you more questions, Deborah, about your entity. So generally we're dealing with an incorporated entity. And so I don't know if you're from a county and you're talking about a county-wide project and that there are these villages surrounding the area where you're planning to do the work. So that's why I think this is going to be a more involved discussion. But generally speaking, if the entity is on the ACS sheet, then that entity in and of itself would be the one that we would be viewing. If you're doing a survey and it's engaging multiple villages, I think the only way that it could address multiple villages would be if it's a county project. Yeah, so that one's going to require more discussion because we would need to know more details from you. So I would say reach out to your project manager with that one, and if you'd like to copy me on the email, that would be fine, and we will try and help you with that.
And Donna, we had one more question just come in from Sean Jeffrey. Can the project be predetermined before the public hearing?
Good morning, Sean. Thanks for remembering all of our wonderful things about CDBG. So the first kind of public hearing that Stephanie spoke about is called the pre-project public hearing. And so before that hearing, you should not have selected your project. So you are correct in raising this question. Nothing has changed in that regard. You need to have at least one hearing before you select your project.
And that's all the questions we have right now, Donna.
Okay, so thanks, Charles, and thank you everybody for those fabulous questions. I know this is challenging material, and the questions really help bring it out, and I'm sure they help everybody else as well. So moving forward, LMI in the application, we just want to remind you to include all of the LMI letters, both the ones to and from DFA. And then please also include all the survey materials that you provided. Even if you provided it before, please provide it again, because different people will be reviewing your application. If their application does not have a letter from DFA saying that the LMI was approved and showing the percentage and the number of beneficiaries, the application is not eligible. So please pay attention to that and follow up with us if you don't get what you need. Demographic data that you take from a survey, if you do a survey, that's going to be used in the application. So there's a lot of need for the LMI materials in the application. So just to recap on the deadlines, that first deadline is June 6th, and that's for the methodology. And that may also take care of it for you. If you're qualifying by ACS, that may be the only letter you need to write. You may be done with it. If you are doing a survey, or if your LMC is a more involved one that requires you to submit the data of the beneficiaries, then you may also need to submit something for the LMI calculation and documentation deadline of July 15th. And then the application deadline is August 19th. So there's a short timeline this year, not a lot of space in there for things. And another reminder about including all those letters. So this is the last, the thing that with the asterisks that we mentioned at the beginning, and this is where the census blocks come into play. We are not sure if this can be done, but we're putting the challenge out there for you. There's a link to a HUD GIS data sheet, and it really, what we've been able to do with it is we can only use it to see the LMI for census blocks. And we've played around with it. We've tried to make it do other things, but it generally only does that. And in New Mexico, where the census blocks are relatively large, this doesn't appear to be extremely helpful, because you're still going to have the burden of proof on you of proving that your census block that you've chosen is the whole area of that census block is receiving the benefit of your project, and that the area outside of your census block is not. So I don't know how that's going to work, but there may be a few projects out there for whom this is something interesting that they'd like to explore. So we're putting it out there. Charles, have you been able to put that in the chat yet? Or are we going to ask them to follow up with the project manager to get that?
I think we're going to ask them to follow up with the project manager for this targeted section.
Okay, so that's just another option, and I would encourage everybody to make sure that the other three options don't work before trying this, because we're not sure either if this will work. So, but we want to make it available because we want to help all the applicants to the extent possible in pursuing their objectives. And so here are the links again, and have we been able to put the PDF in there?
The PDFs aren't going in the chat right now.
Oh, they're not going in there. Okay.
But I can get you links.
Oh, okay. If you could get the links in there, that would be fabulous. And we then, if we're not able to get the PDFs today during the workshop, we will definitely be attaching them to the email that goes out with the link to the survey and the link to the test. Whew. So lots of surveys and tests and links, and it's just a lot to take in, isn't it? But happily, we are through with the LMI presentation, and we are ready to go to Jalen for a quiz.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the LMI. I'll give you guys a few more seconds for this one, just because it is a lot of information. And these questions will most in fact be on that application test, so please participate, it'll help you along. Okay, so let's go over these answers. I'm gonna go ahead and show our correct answer. Looks like majority of you did get that correct, 51%. Looks like I scooped over the first question. So if an entity received DFA approval for a survey and conducts it, but the percentage of LMI beneficiaries is only 49%, you can do all of the above. You can wait until next year. You can attempt to use the HUD mapping tool to justify the census block, and then you can discuss with DFA the possibility of modified universe or reconducting a survey. And then we'll just jump to the last question. What type of LMI approval is required with the application? That is right, a packet of LMI documentation and an email or letter signed by one of us project managers to go ahead and move forward on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and send you back to Donna for your follow-up questions, and thank you for participating in the little Quizlets.
Thank you, Jalen. That was fabulous. And I'm looking at those scores on the quizzes and thinking you guys are gonna ace the test. Charles, do we have any more questions in the chat?
We have one from Kay Brown. Will the slides for this training be emailed to attendees afterwards?
Yes, what I'm hoping to do is both email them and post the presentations to the website. On the off chance that we encounter technical difficulties sending all those PDFs, at the minimum, we will definitely post them all to the website.
Thank you.
So thank you, Charles. Can we do another 5-minute break? And Jalen, if we could post that.
Yes, ma'am.
And apologize for the breaks, folks, but hopefully you need it as well. I do think that we're on schedule to wrap up on time today, which is exciting. Exciting for everybody who wants to go to lunch, but we're not quite there yet. So we look forward to coming back at 10:35.
I'm pulling up that slide now. Technical difficulty.
Okay, we're on.
Greetings, everybody. We're coming back from the break. Hope that was refreshing for you. Wanted to go through the application resources that are available this year. First and foremost are the project managers. They'll be your main line of support, and I'll go through that in more detail. Second of all are the web pages. On the web pages, you'll find our application instructions, the checklist, which will help you prepare your application and track all your exhibits, the exhibits themselves, which you can download from our website, and the implementation manual, which provides detailed guidelines to follow for the CDBG program, the implementation exhibits, and training videos. Lastly, I wanted to point out that the COGs themselves are great resources. Many of the COGs across the state have been administering CDBG grants for grantees for many years and are very knowledgeable, and they can be a great source of support for you. So the CDBG project managers, including myself, Stephanie, Charles, and Jalen, we can provide technical assistance to you in your application preparation. We can help you walk through your exhibits, understand how and when to use them, how to complete them. We can review your work and your different activities related to the application and keep you on track with your deadlines. Particularly, this is helpful for low to moderate income, procurement, and your environmental. Lastly, we're a great advocate and ally for you, and please use us. We are here to help you, and we are happy to help you. You can find out who your project manager is by looking at the county assignments. Charles is in gold, Stephanie's in pink, I'm in green, and Jaylen is in turquoise. And this is also posted on our website, which you can access on our main pages that I'll walk you through now. And I'd invite you to follow along with me. Charles is going to drop in the chat this main link, and you can follow through. I'm going to walk you through all these different pages on our website. So the main site that you access is the DFA website. If you look on the far right-hand corner, you'll see the Infrastructure Planning and Development Division. Click on that. This is the IPDD main page. If you scroll down, you'll find CDBG contacts. Right here, you'll see us starting with Donna all the way down. Phone numbers and emails are included. The IPDD bureaus, if you scroll down further on that same page, we are located here at the bottom of the list, the Community Development Block Grant Program. If you click on our link there, it'll open up to two different pages. Start with the information page. This is what it looks like. CDBG information. You'll find your application materials here at the top of the page. On that page, you'll find application information in detail. This includes the schedule and deadlines, instructions, the application form itself, Exhibit G, the checklist to prepare your application and submit it, and the project manager lists organized in a map and also alphabetically by the county assignments. The application checklist looks like this. It's been reformatted this year, hopefully a little bit easier to use. This will help you prepare your application exhibits. There are a number of them, so this will hopefully make it a little easier for you. It will help you also track your completed tasks and your materials. It will give you guidance how to name the files correctly, and please follow those naming guidelines. And it will also help you organize and save your files correctly to the USB. The exhibits for the application itself look like this. The videos for the application series are located here. For 2023, note that The guidance covers mostly citizen participation, LMI, methodology and calculation, and completing your CDBG application. If you go to the implementation page, you'll find other videos that will be of help, particularly for environmental, federal requirements, and professional services. Though I will say, other videos will also be of help. For example, the Life of a CDBG project will give you an overview of the complete process, which is very helpful. I highly recommend you look into that. If you have any questions about which videos would be most helpful for you, please connect with your project manager. They'll help clarify. We'll also be sending out a one-page PDF which links all the videos and the times involved so you can plan on watching those. The CDBG implementation manual itself is an important reference. Use the 2019 to 2021 implementation manual. That's the most updated version. It's 443 pages. The IM provides detailed guidance on CDBG, including the federal regulations involved, DFA policy requirements, key tasks that you need to undertake, and instructions on where and how to use the exhibits. Oops, wrong order, sorry. Exhibits themselves are organized by chapter 1 to 5. You download these individually from the exhibits tables online that are located if you scroll down on the implementation manual page and the information page. Keep in mind that the implementation manual itself does include exhibits, but we don't want you to use those because some of them are outdated. So we want you to download the forms themselves from the tables, and I'll go through that in the next slides. The training videos include both application and implementation oriented videos. Some of them are for post-award only, so if you have any doubts, just check with your CDBG project manager and they'll clarify which ones would be most helpful for you to watch. These are the exhibits tables. They start with chapter 1. Download these individually. Any updates to our exhibits will always be posted here. Chapter 1 is project administration. Chapter 2, the environmental review. Chapter 3, procurement of professional services. Chapter 4, construction contracts and labor standards. Chapter 5 is monitoring checklists. These will be used for post-award. Some of the IM exhibits in the manual itself are outdated, so don't use those. Go to these tables to get your exhibits, please. These are what the exhibits tables look like for chapters 2 through 5, further down on the same page. Lastly, just remember that communication is key. Research has shown that it takes 7 times to hear a message being communicated for it to be heard and acted upon. So just be patient with yourself and connect with your project manager. I also want to point out how we learn, because this is a long process and it takes some investment. So unfortunately, by tomorrow, 95% of this workshop is going to be forgotten, unless you reread the materials, watch the videos, and discuss with your project managers and your team. And I highly recommend you approach this as a team effort. We learn better by practicing and by teaching each other. Lastly, there will be problems and issues to overcome. You might have some challenges, there might be some delays, you'll be asked to do some revisions on occasion, and you might even encounter some roadblocks. But there's an old adage that says, or that asks, how do you eat an elephant? Which seems like an impossible task. Well, you take it on one bite at a time. And that's the best approach with this project, which might seem overwhelming, but has some really incredible rewards at the end of it. And we thank you for your time and effort. Last of all, I want to end with a quote and hopefully an inspiration from St. Francis of Assisi. He said that we should start by doing what's necessary. Then we do what is possible. And suddenly you are doing the impossible. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you success with your applications. Oh, now we're going for questions, sorry.
No, that's okay. Christina, we actually don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, we just got one. Do you mind if I chime in real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, Christina, how early can we start for the application next year?
That's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure because things might change between this year and next. Donna?
You can definitely start anytime, and we do sometimes have applicants that start a year early to start preparing their applications. It's also an option if you're working on it and the LMI doesn't work out, and then you're going to be at least able to use some of your work for the next year. So yeah, it start whenever you can, but if you wanted to start this year for next year, that would be fine too. Just talk with your project manager about it. Anything else, Charles?
That's all we have right now, Donna.
Okay, well, Christina, thank you so much for that presentation, and I am gonna go ahead and share the next presentation, which is the last one, which is best practices. Because we don't have another quiz for.
Not for the resources, but
Okay.
we will have one for the best practices, so
Oh,
see you guys
okay.
in a while.
Alrighty. Okay, so best practices here, we are sharing, just gonna put it in slideshow. And we're gonna look at some things that might seem kind of random, but there are some common themes. And these are the common themes. We're going to talk about compliance. We're going to talk in a little more detail about procuring for your professional administrator, connecting with us, the files, another quick note on the LMI, some budgetary considerations, and a few more reminders on the procurement. And then we will highlight a few of the application requirements in connection to improving your application. So compliance is super important to us, and it really starts with the application cycle, even though the results might not be visible until after a project begins. And we want to emphasize that it really affects all the parties involved on the project, from the grantee to the administrator to DFA to all the vendors, right down to the smallest subcontractor. And all of them are in turn affecting us. So we're really serious about this. Our manuals and our forms are designed to protect all of us. And we would discourage folks from trying to reinterpret the CFRs. It's really not necessary, for one thing, but also HUD has told us on a number of occasions that they audit us according to our manuals. So in the unlikely event that there was some contradiction between our materials and the CFRs, and for example, we were more stringent, HUD would want us to be following our manual. So it's imperative that we all use our manual, use our materials. In a HUD or a DOL audit, the grantee would be responsible. And so we're really looking out for you here, and I know that it feels painful sometimes when we're telling you no, that can't work. We don't intend that. We intend to have us all protected. When we do find something that isn't compliant, we do seek a remedy. We'll turn over every stone we can to try and find a remedy. We had a lot of turnovers last year, and it did result in a few situations where we had to deny pay requests, and then we had to revise scopes or do whatever we could to remedy it. And even we had an issue where we had to get a grantee to return funds, and then we had to return it to the U.S. Treasury. So we're not happy about those things. We don't enjoy doing those things at all. It takes us a lot of time, and we'd really rather be focusing our efforts helping the healthy projects, the ones that are active, and doing what you all need us to do, reviewing your materials, getting things approved, getting you paid. That's what we would rather be focusing our efforts on. So just know that, and just know that that's what we're doing at the end of the day. We're trying to prevent funds having to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. The manual, if used properly, is the best means of protection for that. Communicating also with your project manager, as has been mentioned a number of times during this workshop, is also super helpful with that. And it's important to get into the right habits now during the application process, and then that way, if you get an award, you will be in those good habits and in those good communication channels with the project manager, and it's going to help you. Another note on compliance, just for future reference, if you are awarded, we will be asking, starting with 2025, for the grantees to appoint the labor officer from somebody from among their entity. And I'm pointing this out now so that we don't have a lot of anger, frustration after people get awarded, but also so that you can start thinking who of your entity might be the person appointed for this. The reason it's on the compliance side is that we've determined, in conjunction with conversations with legal and other things, that this is imperative for us. The grantee recipient has to be signing the documents on the labor compliance. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't ask your administrator to help you share in the burden of work with those tasks, but it does mean that in my understanding of it, that the grantee is going to want to take this seriously and think about this and think about who may be on staff that could do that. And then we will provide training, and then of course you can also rely on your administrator to help you. So that's a change that we have. But in general, compliance is super important. Keep it in mind when you're doing everything for your application, and reach out to your project manager with any questions. So the procuring the external professional grant administrator. So we do want the procurement to be part of the application. So we're going to go into that in some detail right now. Just a note here, if you have selected the COG to work with, if you have a COG in your area that is able and willing to do that for you, then you are lucky. You do not need to do a procurement for that. You still need to conclude an Exhibit 3B contract agreement with the COG, and you need to include that in your application, as well as a 1X approved by DFA showing that the COG has the SAM registration. We'll make another note about that a little bit later. But the actual RFP process is not necessary if you're wanting to work with the COG. For any other grant administrator that you are selecting, is that snow or rain out there, folks?
It's like slush.
So any other professional administrator that you're seeking to bring on for your project is going to require a procurement, and we want the procurement with the application. And so we know this is new, so we're emphasizing it. And the form that we want you to use for the RFP is going to be the Exhibit 3A if you're just procuring for admin separately. If you're going to combine the design and admin procurement, which you may want to do, you may not. There are different considerations, and it's going to be your choice on that. But if you want to procure them together, then you could use the Exhibit 3C. And then that allows you to RFP for both admin and design services. And then you would use the 3D for your contract on that. But either way, we do want those documents with the application, and we want to emphasize that when we say procurement documents, we do not just mean the RFP. There is actually a whole list of documents that we collect with the procurements, and for so many years, I mean, I've been looking at these applications for over 8 years now, And I never see the full packet of all the procurement documents. It's often we just get the RFP and the contract, but there are other things such as the proof of advertising, the opening of the minutes, the score sheets, the notifications to the unsuccessful proposals, the minutes approving the award. So you could look at the professional services checklist in the implementation section, and you could ask your project manager if you have any trouble finding that. And that's going to show you the things that need to be included. And of course the 1X, because we need to have all vendors on the project. All of them require 1Xs. So these are the things that we need with the application this year. And if we get an application that does not have a contracted professional grant administrator, it will be deemed ineligible unless they have gotten a waiver from DFA saying that they do not require an external grant administrator. And I know we're gonna have the questions about, can I get it, it's gonna be a case-by-case basis. And so you would have to, I would say, suggest first reaching out to your project manager if you're wanting to get a waiver, and then go from there. And they will help you. It's going to involve writing a letter, and it is going to involve looking at the entity's history with CDBG. And so I don't know how big our appetite will be for those waivers, but we can look at that when we get if we get requests for that. So how to budget for this grant administration? We still are dealing with a cap of CDBG administrative costs of 3%. So we don't have a cap on the grant amount, but we cannot spend more than 3% of the CDBG funds on administration. So what this means is if you have a situation where you need to pay your administrator more, you may want to cover that from leveraging. And that would be a really good way to deal with that. And just also something that we see when we look at the budgets, we're seeing sometimes that the administrative services are not only contained in the administrative line item. And we're seeing sometimes that there's an environmental review piece in the other professional services. So that is not what we want. The other professional services should not include administrative services. We want all the administrative services in the administrative line item of the budget. So think about that when you're doing your application. And the reason that we're bringing this out is we want to make it fair for everybody. And so no hiding environmental services into the other professional services. Other professional services is for inspections and testing, or if there's something of a unique nature, unique for this project that needs to be done. But in general, we should be able to look at the budgets and see all the administrative services, verify that CDBG is only 3%, and then if there's any additional, it's covered by leveraging. So how do you find a qualified administrator? Well, we do want you to procure for that. So when you do an RFP, and that's a big part of this process. But sometimes knowing that there are not super big numbers of people in our state who could do this, it sometimes helps to have some ideas in mind. And so I would say definitely the first thing that you could have in mind, and the first thing that you might want to check out is the COG. And again, with that, you're not needing to procure it. You're just needing to get them contracted for your project. Other options include engineering firms and consultants. And so there are a variety of those out there that have CDBG experience. But given that your RFP is qualifications based, because it's professional services, so it's a qualifications based process, here are some questions that you should consider when you are looking at those proposals. You could think about how many projects, CDBG projects, have they administered? how long were those projects? How many years of experience do they have with CDBG? And those would be some things that would just be really important. I would not recommend hiring or contracting a project administrator without CDBG experience. I just don't know how that would go. I would think that that would put you possibly in a difficult position for both your application and your project. And also I would add, if you're struggling with this issue, you should definitely reach out and ask your project manager for some guidance. They might be able to provide some assistance in this area. And then if you're saying I'm going to go for the waiver, we need that waiver. I would say it's possible. There are a few entities out there that I could see us approving a waiver for. But think about, does your entity have the time? And we can't tell you really how much time it is, but we do know that there are weeks when the administrator is probably going to be working 20 hours a week on CDBG. Not all weeks are like that, but it would need to be somebody that your entity has the ability to give them the time they need to devote to this, because that's the biggest thing, is the time. It's also going to have to be the possibility of somebody to get trained up on it, or if you have somebody that's done it for a lot of years, how sure are you that that person is going to continue on with you? Because that's another issue that we get into, is an entity that's had great history and they've got somebody who's been doing it for a lot of years, and then that person retires. So those are some things to think about. And I think if previous application cycles had a real financial incentive to try and do this ourselves, because you could save yourself some money, right? And I think with this year not having a cap on the funding amount, you have a wonderful opportunity to get the money that you need. And this is really about trying to make this accessible so that you can get the administrative resources that you need for the project and not be in a situation where you are not able to complete the project in a timely manner because you just don't have time. So think about these things, and I would say this is probably one of the first questions that you'll need to tackle. You might be able to get your hearings going at the same time that you're working on this question, but I would not want to do too much without getting your administration in place. So connect with your DFA project manager, definitely. And we've already shown you how to do that, and so I know this is just repeat, but reach out to us and connect. So here's another thought, and hopefully this has already occurred to all of you all, and that's why you're attending this workshop. But this year, it really is a unique opportunity. We cannot promise that future years will have no cap. We're going to see how this goes. And I totally can imagine us going back to having some sort of cap, depending on what happens this year. But this year is a really unique opportunity in this regard, because you can actually request the amount of money that you really feel you need. And not having to fight to get and maintain all those other funding sources can free you up to be able to focus on doing the project. And so that's really what we're hoping for. And we're also hoping that it's going to help the projects to be streamlined and move along faster and not have the problems with delays that are involved when you're trying to get more leveraging. So think about that. We're not trying to say don't have leveraging, because, excuse me, you're welcome to get leveraging and include leveraging, and you can get extra points for that. But we're just saying, think of CDBG as the main course and the leveraging as the appetizer or the side dish, and that thinking of your project in that way. And I want to say we have done amazing things. New Mexico has done amazing things in terms of leveraging, and that's one of the things on my list whenever I get the time to go back and figure out how much leveraging we have right now, because I think it's well over the amount of CDBG funds that have been contributed. It's astounding amount of leveraging, and you guys are amazing in that regard that you've done that. But this year, we have an opportunity to be successful in another way and on another level. And so we'd like to help you do that. Just a note on the surveys, if you're thinking you're going to have to do a survey, it takes a lot of time to do a survey. And one of the big mistakes that I see being made by an applicant who's doing a survey is they end up focused on that survey. And they're doing that survey to the exclusion of everything else. And then their application ends up being less wonderful than, less competitive than another application where they didn't have to do a survey. And then also you have to think about with the survey, what's going to happen if it comes out with less than 51%. So those are some things that you should strategize about this. And we're not saying don't do a survey, but we're saying if you're in that predicament where you think you might need to, figure out how to deal with these two things. And that'll put you in a better position and it'll make your application better. Filing starts with the application. And I think this is one of the things that we also see is that people have the notion that they'll get the funding and then they'll set up the files, right? But there's a lot of the things in the files for the application are going to go into your project files if you get an award, right? So we want to just set some things straight here and be very, very clear. We're trying to be very clear this year so that there's no confusion. And so one thing that apparently there was still a little bit of confusion about is whether they need to have electronic files. Everybody needs to have electronic files. The application is electronic. We've been digital since the first week of the pandemic. So you're welcome to have a paper copy in your office if that helps you. And we do print things out. Sometimes you can see I have printed notes for this workshop because I'm looking at the computer and I'm looking at my notes. So you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to have a printed binder if that helps you in your office, but please prepare electronic files for the application and also going forward for the project, you're going to need electronic files. So the administrator and the grantee are both going to be responsible this year for the electronic files. And the reason why we're asking for that is because we've had some issues, and we get sometimes those responses of I know I have it somewhere, but that's not the same as having it in your file. So we really want to make sure that we're protected and you're protected. And so we're asking that both the administrator and the grantee be prepared to be responsible for the files. And when we were talking about this last week and just kind of brainstorming together, and Charles had a really good approach to this. So Charles, how would you deal with this if you were representing an applicant entity and you needed to arrange a system so that two people could be responsible and at any given time could produce necessary files for the project? How would you do that?
Thanks, Donna. From someone who comes from a local entity, I can tell you that what Donna's saying is exactly right, that people come and people go, and these projects last for years. So it is crucial that both parties keep these electronic files, and I would recommend you keep them separate of each other. It's really tempting to use things like SharePoint and Dropbox, but that puts the onus back on one person to make sure everything is in the file. What I would do, and what I would recommend to all the local entities, is that you sit down with your project administrator and you create a communication plan where if they communicate with the project manager at DFA, they CC you on everything and you get a copy of every document and you file it independently of your project administrator. Just in case something were to come up, someone were to leave, a contract were to expire, you have every documentation that you need.
Thanks, Charles. That sounds like a fabulous way to approach it. And I think that's really going to speak to the concern that we're trying to address here. And the sad stories of something happening to somebody's computer, something happening to their email, somebody retiring somewhat suddenly. These are all things that have happened to our grantees. So think about this, make a plan for it, and keep in mind that at any time during the project, DFA is within its rights to ask to see those files. And we are thinking about making that a customary part of the monitorings going forward, just to ensure that we're doing our due diligence. We haven't established that yet, so I'm just giving you some of our ideas. But we are able, and we may at some point during the project ask you for electronic files, even ones that you've already sent to us. So those are some notes on filing, and we're gonna, before we go back to our favorite topic of the day, which is procurement, I wanna check and see, Charles, if we have some questions that have accumulated in the chat.
We do. We have a few questions, Donna. Starting with Tiffany. She asks, after the pre-selection public hearings, can the governing body choose a project and then pass the required resolution at a later date once the entity has their certified cost estimates?
That sounds like it would work, but could you read that one more time for me, please?
Sure. After the pre-selection public hearings, can the governing body choose a project and then pass the required resolution at a later date once the entity has their certified cost estimates?
I think that would be fine. I think that would be fine, Tiffany, but knowing your extensive experience with CDBG, if there's a wrinkle that I'm not understanding, feel free to reach out to us for follow-up. And you could reach out to me or your project manager and we'll try and help you, but I don't see any issues with that.
We've got a question from Claire. What percentage of the grant award should the applicant budget for to pay the professional grant administrator?
Good morning, Claire. I'm so glad that you've joined us today. So we can't really give you that guidance, I think. I think that in the past, it was perceived that 3% was reasonable, and 3%, of course, is the limit that can be spent on the administration from CDBG funds. But in the last couple of years, we have had a lot of entities exceeding that and providing leveraging to balance it. And so I can't speak to a percentage, and I think you're probably gonna have to RFP and see what you get to determine that. But I would just say that we're aware that it is common for the administrative costs on these projects to exceed 3%.
And then lastly, this is from Felicity, is there any flexibility in relationship to entities who are behind in audits? As per this instruction, audits must be current and will be examined for fiscal capacity and capability.
So Felicity, thank you for that question, and so glad that you could join us today. It's a good question, and I think that for today, for the workshop, we're not going to be able to give you an answer on that. I would recommend for that entity, for that particular entity, contacting the project manager, get us an email and we can check on it. I would also say for that entity to check with their budget analyst in LGD and find out what the entity's status is. But if you're saying they don't have their audits in, then that means the entity already knows that they have this issue. Does that mean that they could not meet the threshold? That is what that suggests to me. And so I would say that they're looking at best at trying to get a threshold waiver, and that the likelihood of that, if they're not able to remedy the situation by the application hearing, is probably not great. I would say it would even for us to consider a waiver, the entity would have to be able to remedy that before the application hearing. But we'd have to consider it. We'd have to look at the documents and consider that. So I'd say follow up with your project manager and let's look at it.
And those are all the questions. Okay, we got another question from the Village of Mosquero. As a person who has dropped into a CDBG grant mid-project feet first and had zero knowledge on what's report and when, Is there a checklist provided that could help in situations such as this? Especially if they're a one-man army who does everything, such as myself and other small micro municipalities.
Good morning, Mascaro. I recognize you, Dallas, from your information there, and I'm so glad that you could join us. So yes, there are a number of resources, and I would go back over Christina's presentation because I think she outlined a lot of those resources. And the first and foremost would be that checklist of what goes into the application. And so I would say looking at that, making your folders, setting up your folders in line with that checklist is going to be a great place to start. And then I would say reviewing the entire application instructions. And then, as we've said a number of times, reaching out to your project manager. And I know you can do this.
That's all we have, Donna.
Okay, so let us continue, and I think, bear with us, folks, I think we've got about seven, 8 more slides left here. So we'll try and get this wrapped up in a timely manner. And so now we are going to talk a little bit more about procurement. And these are a few general notes, but it's very needed for us to communicate these things to you. So CDBG is federal funding, but keep in mind that it's federal funding with very unique requirements. And CDBG has its own CFRs. And some of the CFRs that relate to a lot of other federal funding sources do not relate to the block grants, of which CDBG is one. So we're just putting that out there because occasionally we have intrepid grantees who are researching the CFRs and trying to promote things that are not in the manual. And this is just part of it. This is part of the issue, is that we have our own CFRs. So there will not be CES or state pricing agreements accepted for CDBG in 2025. And we again want to be very clear about this because this is something that feedback that we've gotten in the past is that we haven't been clear enough. And so we're being very clear that that's not going to be okay for CDBG for 2025. We know that CES and state pricing agreements have been very much promoted, and including, in fact, by our new division. And we recognize how helpful they can be in other contexts. And so we really want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, they do not work for us for CDBG at this time. So we're putting this out there. I know there's at least in your minds there might be some pushback. So what I hear a lot is that grantees are trying to save time and money. We get that. We all want to save time and money. We're trying to save us and you time and money. And so consider this. If you're trying to save time, you're going to be able to save time by doing things the way they're outlined in our manual versus having to potentially redo them, or even worse, having potentially to repay money to the U.S. Treasury. So it's a time saver to do things and use the processes that we're outlining for you. And if you're not sure what those processes are, if you're not sure about the forms, contact the project manager for your area and we can help you with that. In terms of cost, I think the cost argument made sense in previous years when everybody was trying to get an infrastructure project from this itty-bitty $750,000 grant. I'm sorry to call it itty-bitty because we all know it's not, but it's yet at the same time never enough to do an infrastructure project for the needs that we have in this state right now. So with that, trying to save money, I can see that would be paramount in people's planning and in people's strategizing. But we don't have this issue this year because if you feel like it's going to cost you more to use our forms and to go out to bid you can factor that cost into your budget and you can request the money that you think that you're gonna need. So hopefully that's gonna help, and it's gonna be easier in that sense. Again, we're trying to make the program more accessible and more flexible. If you are considering going out to bid before the application deadline, which almost never happens, but if that is you, you absolutely must have your environmental approved by DFA, and you must have received the Exhibit 2Q. If you think that this might be something you'll be doing or you'll be able to do, even if you think you're going to be reusing an environmental, we do have forms we need you to fill out to get permission to reuse the environmental. Do not go out to bid, please, without contacting your project manager. If you're in one of those very unique special circumstances, we can accommodate and make sure you get the 2Q. It's a little weird for us because we technically don't have authority about a project that we haven't yet awarded, but we can work around that and get you a 2Q if that's you. If you're not in a position to be able to go out to bid before the application deadline, just a reminder that if you do get an award and if you do get to the point of being ready to go out to bid, you will have to use our Exhibit 4A. And it's a fabulous form because it has all the federal requirements that we need in it. It has the Davis-Bacon, the Copeland anti-kickback, the QASA on the overtime. It has the BABA requirement, and it has the SAM requirement. And it's a really robust document, as many of you know. It's not changed much over the years, but there have been a few new little things that we've inserted into the 2024 version. But just keep this in mind, that this is the only acceptable way to procure for construction on a CDBG project. And again, as Christina reminded us, we need to say everything 7 times. So I think this might be the 7th time I'm saying this. Please remember to follow our manual to lessen the likelihood of needing to repay funds. Oh, and a reminder that all vendors on the project are going to need a SAMS registration. So any vendors that you procure before the application deadline, we want the 1Xs approved by our office, and your project manager can show you how to do that. We want those 1Xs with the applications, please. So all procurements on the project, our processes, our forms, and please keep in mind that there are interim approvals required for CDBG, including approvals before RFPs are advertised. And so your project manager can get you those, and it's just going to be an email, and then you can keep that with your files. There is an exception that I can think of, and I know everybody was always wanting to know what the exceptions are. And that might be if you have design work completed with another funding source, like for example, capital outlay funding, and it was completed prior to the date that you might get the grant agreement. Now, is it completed at the date of the application deadline or not? That's not, it doesn't have to be. As long as it's completed by the date of the grant agreement, that the grant agreement is issued and executed, you could utilize leveraging work that wasn't procured according to our forms and processes. That's tricky though, because if your design is not yet finished, what if it doesn't get finished by the time you get a grant agreement? So if you're in that gray area, I would say use our forms, don't risk it, just do it the way we require. If it's capital outlay, it's going to be okay to use our forms to procure for it. But that's the only exception that I can think of, is if the work was completed prior to getting the grant agreement, or it will be completed prior to getting the grant agreement. Anything else needs to be procured in conjunction with our requirements. So optional activities prior to the application deadline, you could work on the environmental. And of course, that starts with getting an environmental determination, and you could send the exhibit 2A and 2A1 for that to your project manager, and they can help you with that. You could also check out module 4 of the implementation series that Christina referred you to. And you could check out chapter 2 of the implementation manual, and that could help you with those activities. We okay? Okay, good. And then you could also get started on the procurement for your design. If you want more information about that, see module 6 of the implementation series, as well as chapter 3 of the implementation manual. You could also start or even complete your design prior to the application. And just please remember to include all the relevant documents with your application to get all the points for these things. So when talking about the requirements, everything's in the application instructions, of course, but we just want to highlight a few things and how you can work with these things to optimize the competitiveness of your application and to optimize the compliance of your hopefully future product. So the certifications and assurances is like an 8-page document that outlines all the legal requirements that need to be complied with on this project. Everybody gets their chief elected official to sign it, and that's great. The best practice here would be to read it, understand it, have everybody on your team read it, maybe even give it to your legal, and have them check it out, and just make sure that you're really fully comprehending what all is in there and what you're signing up for. Site control. So site control is a requirement for eligibility according to the NMAC. The entity has to own the property of the project, and then sometimes you also need easements on adjacent properties. So all that needs to be taken care of before the application deadline. SAM's registration for all vendors on the project, and this includes your external professional administrator, and this year we're requiring those with the application. If you haven't procured for them yet because you're going to wait and get the award and then go out to procure for design, or if you haven't procured for your construction yet, as most applicants will not, then you'll get those 1Xs later. But your professional administrator, since we're saying you have to have it with your application, we would need that 1X with the application. Procurement, as discussed, enough said, and then a certified cost estimate for any grant amount over $500,000. This is a requirement of the current NMAC. We're still with the current NMAC, other than those provisions which the CDC has waived for us, but we did not ask for this to be waived. So we do need a certified cost estimate for any grant amount greater than $500,000. And then all the federal labor laws apply to all of the construction on the project, regardless of the funding source. And so this is something that is often tricky for people, and they think, well, if I'm paying for it from my leveraging, then it doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters because everything in your project budget, everything, the CDBG and the leveraging, is all subject to all the CDBG requirements. So that's again why we're saying make CDBG the main course, make that the bulk of your funding, so that you don't have to be thinking that you're doing all this compliance stuff, you're doing Davis-Bacon on state money or whatever. Make CDBG the centerpiece of your application. But yeah, if you have any leveraging, it's going to be subject to all those federal labor requirements. And so it's just a very important best practice to be thinking about that now and planning for that as you do your application. And let's see here. So this is just a list of the folders that you would have for the application that fit with that checklist that Christina showed you. And so it just takes you in the order of the folders. If this was me and I was going to be doing a CDBG application this year, which I am happy that I'm not because it's so much work. But if I was going to do that, I would set up these folders right away. I would set up these folders right away so I could start putting things in them and populating them, and so that I could stay organized in the process as I was going through it. But that's just me, and as long as we get it this way at the end, that's just a best practice to start organizing those things now. So how the applications are reviewed has not changed. If, for those of you who have been involved with this for many years now, we're still going off of the NMAC for this process. And so if you want to find out more about that, you can refer to the NMAC and read about it. But basically, DFA will be reviewing the applications. We'll be inviting other state agencies to review the applications to give us a technical review, and we'll be compiling all of that and providing it to the CDC, and the application hearing will be an opportunity for the applicants to present their projects directly to the CDC, and then we'll have the allocation meeting when the CDC makes their final decisions on the awards and allocations. The points have also not changed, so some of you may remember some more involved presentations on this, and even suggestions to strategize accordingly. And I think that you probably, many of you have probably already become adept at doing this. It's not changed, but just a very brief overview. And I think we're down to, like, this is the next to, possibly the next to the last slide here. So description and need for up to 10 points. This considers every place in the application where you have narrative. I would say this is always something that all applicants could improve. And one way to do that might be to ask various people on your team to review whatever's written. I have the strange feeling that, maybe it's not strange, but I have the feeling that sometimes so much time goes into all of these other components of the project that putting the description in there and writing about the need is being done at a very late date of the application, and it's maybe even just kind of an afterthought. And you could pick up points that are being missed by paying attention to that earlier. One way to do that might be, if you're considering these two different projects, maybe write out what the need is for each of those projects earlier on, and really start that going. And remember, with the need, to bring out the things that are emotional. I mean, I used to say make us cry, but I don't think that has gone over very well, because there are plenty of ways to make us cry. So let's forget that we ever said make us cry. But when you're writing about the need, and when you're thinking about it, what is the emotional connection to that? Have there been injuries? Have there been loss of property, or loss of even if there's been like a fatality or something connected to this problem that you're trying to solve? Putting some of that into your application is going to enhance that category. So I would say work on the description and need. LMI and appropriateness, there are up to 20 points for this, and a lot of it goes to the percentage of LMI, the number of beneficiaries. It's not ideal the way it is right now in the NMAC, and it's one of the reasons we're trying to get the NMAC amended. Also in this 20 points are some points for appropriateness for the community, appropriateness for our program, and also consideration of the UGG. So those are some things to think about on LMI and appropriateness. Oh, and the UGG, for those who don't know what the UGG is, the UGG is the historical record. It's called Uniform Grant Guidance, but it's that name doesn't really make a lot of sense to a lot of us. But it's basically, it's considering the historical performance of the entity applying. Cost benefit is a cost beneficiary ratio for the project, and that's for up to 10 points. Leveraging is also up to 10 points. And it's leveraging is whatever is not required. So again, the non-rural applications are required to have 10%, but the non-rural applications are not required to have a match. So it would be everything above that, and for the not, or for the rurals, it'd be any leveraging at all on the project. They would be able to receive extra points for that. Citizen participation, so for this, unfortunately, everybody gets 5 of these points because 2 public hearings are required for eligibility. So this is another one of those things that we've identified that we need to fix with the NMAC. But that said, there are 5 other points that you can get if you do 3 or 4 public hearings. So if you do more than what is required, you can pick up some extra points pretty easily there. Planning is up to 10 points, and this does include your ICIP. It includes if you have named your project specifically and slated it for CDBG funding on your ICIP. It includes if you have a comprehensive plan that names your project or speaks to the need for your project. Water ordinances, water conservation ordinances, anything that your entity has to try and save or economize on water, please include with your application in this section, and you can pick up a few extra points with that. Asset management plan, you can get up to 10 points for an asset management plan. One of those points is possible if you have proof of having attended an asset management training. All the other points go to the plan. If it meets, depending on how many of the 5 criteria stated in the NMAC that it meets, and I do not know those off the top of my head, and in the interest of time, I have not included them on the slide. So if you are curious, you can look those up. Unfortunately, we do see that a lot of applicants don't have asset management plans, and that is a way to pursue the 10 points, but I'm not suggesting that you drop everything and work on an asset management plan, because it might be a better strategy to work on your application. It's all up to you, but these are the points that we're dealing with for scoring this year. Feasibility and readiness, so embedded in this is also a 5 points redundancy that everybody gets the 5 points for site control. And again, we're not able to change that. That's part of the NMAC that we're dealing with. Everybody's going to get that because you have to have the site control for the application to be considered. The remaining 15 points, you could pick those up for getting something done on your environmental, for providing us with the procurement of the design. And again, when you're including the procurement for design in your application, remember to include all the pieces of it. Look at the professional services checklist and make sure that you're giving us everything that we need on that procurement. If you have plans already done for the project, you could include that for extra points, and that is about it for feasibility and readiness. So that's the points, folks. And then, let's see, we have one final slide. The deadlines, just a recap on the deadlines. Get your LMI methodology approval to your project manager by June 6th. And then if you have follow-up, the follow-up deadline, if you have a survey, is going to be July 15th. And so those deadlines are when we should receive your items for approval. And please recognize that you may not get your approval from us the same day. It may take us a few days. In some cases, unfortunately, if we have to go back and forth on something, it might even take us a few weeks. It's going to depend on the quality of what's turned in, and we'll do the best that we can, but we're working with all of the grantees to those deadlines. So our approval doesn't have to be by those deadlines, but we would need the document to be initially submitted to us by that deadline for it to be eligible. And then the application deadline is August 19th. And we will send out more information on that closer to that deadline. I know August 19th seems like it's a million years away right now. So sooner, closer to that time, we'll send out the checklist again. We'll send out instructions. I believe we'll still be asking you to mail thumb drives. I'm not yet sure what that address is gonna be, if it's gonna be still the Baton Building or if we're gonna be able to get those here. So we'll clarify all of that information closer to that deadline for you. And you can always check with your project manager on that as well. So this is the team, again, just to show everybody's name. And I think before we close up, we're just about ready to do that from the standpoint of what we're presenting. We do still need to go to the chat and get questions, but before we do that, we want to have one final quiz from Jalen.
Okay, so we do have one final quiz. Ignore that slide yet. And these ones are a little more complex questions from the application test. So I will allow a little more time, since this is our last presentation essentially. If you have any further questions for Donna or any of the other presenters, I would suggest dropping those questions in the chat right now so we can compile them and get you some answers. And in the meantime, again, all the resources and the video copy of the recording will be accessible post-workshop. So you'll be able to go back to these Quizlets and relook at the questions before taking the application test. Okie dokie, so let's go ahead and look at the questions for best practices. All right, we're gonna go ahead and see. Looks like a lot of you are getting the correct answer. So if an applicant procures the design with capital outlay, does it need to follow CDBG procurement requirements? So that is gonna be a yes, unless it will be fully paid out before the grant agreement is executed. Looks like here, majority again, right. If an applicant wants to request 1.5 million, what is the maximum amount of allowable administrative costs for the 2025 application year? 45,000 would be the correct answer there. And lastly, I love this percentage. If an entity wants to start their environmental review before the application deadline, how should they begin? Send us the 2A, send us the 2A1, and talk to your DFA project manager regarding your entity. So, great, thank you for participating in the quizzes.
Can we go back to the second question for a second?
Of course, yeah.
So thank you so much for doing this, Jalen. On this question, I just wanted to make a note that if an applicant wants to request 1.5 million, what is the maximum amount of allowable administrative costs for the 2025 application? So yes, the 45,000 is correct, but the question, and I wrote this question, so full disclosure here. I think I could have made this question more clear we would have had more correct answers if I would have said allow CDBG allowable, because we've stated a number of times that you can have more than 45. You could do more than 3% with your application in the budget as long as it's from the leveraging. So I just wanted to try and clarify that one more time. You're welcome to pay for it out of leveraging, but of CDBG funds, we could only pay the 45,000.
Awesome, thank you, Donna. And again, you guys can come back to this in material so that you can review these before taking the application test. That is required, an 80% passing score. On that note, I am gonna send it back to Donna and the other presenters for any further questions you may have. Thanks for participating in the Quizlets.
Thank you, Jalen, that was wonderful. And I am going to go back to our PowerPoint here where we have the team up here. And so you can just see everybody's names while we investigate the chat. And Charles, what is going on in the chat right now?
Thanks, Donna. We've got a question from Bianca. Some of the COGs have professional service on-call contracts with engineers and other contractors who can assist with CDBG projects. Can our communities utilize those for CDBG?
So that is a fascinating question, and I see my battery is running low, which I was warned about. So as I plug in my laptop so that we don't lose the connection with all of you. So two things with that. First, we have conditions that on-call agreements have to meet to qualify for CDBG, and you can find those in the application. I don't remember off the top of my head which page that is on, but there are 4 conditions. I probably could tell you all those 4 conditions. I can also remember it's chapter 3, page 8 of the implementation manual, where you can find all of those conditions. So they're in a couple of different places. Any on-call agreement would have to meet those conditions. But there's another issue that I'm seeing here, and that is that if you're an applicant, who are you contracting with to provide your administrative services? And that would have to be probably a larger discussion, which I would say reach out to the project manager if you want to write an email to the project manager and copy me, and we could look at it in more detail. But if the applicant is wanting to contract the COG, and then the COG is also using these on-calls with these other organizations, we'd have to be clear on that to say for sure whether or not that was possible. And then we would have to check those on-calls, and we would have to get 1X's for everybody involved. Just because it's not a direct relationship doesn't mean that it's not would still be subject to all those requirements. So that's a kind of challenging situation. I think we'll have to look at that in more detail, Bianca.
And then Donna, we have a question from Patrick. How long is a test result valid before having to retake the test again?
For the entire application cycle. So if you take it today, if we're able to get that email out to you after lunch and you're able to take the test today, you are good with that and able to submit your application. You're just going to need a test result for your administrator, and then you'd be set.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions, but Kay Brown said that we did a fantastic job.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Charles, for reading all those. And I want to say thank you to the entire CDBG team. It is truly a pleasure working with you and doing what we do, and I really appreciate your efforts. I also want to say thank you so much to all of the folks on the line this morning, all of the potential applicants, because we know that it's a choice to do CDBG, and we really appreciate your interest. We appreciate the consideration and the serious approach that you have to dealing with our requirements. And we really appreciate you and all of those existing projects out there. We appreciate you, and we wish you great luck with your application. Please reach out to us. And we look forward to hearing from you. And with that,
There's one more question.
oh, there is?
We got a clarification from Patrick.
Okay.
If I want to submit next year, should I wait to take the test?
Patrick, I would say go ahead and take the test this year so that you can see for yourself how much you've learned, because I bet anything you pass that test and it's gonna reinforce those feelings of that you can do this. And then you will have to take it again next year, but it won't be hard for you to do it the following year after you did it this year.
And that's all we have, Donna.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you all. Stop sharing and mute us.